Democrats are against Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu told that no international pressure will stop us from realizing all of the goals of the war, which constitutes eliminating Hamas, freeing all of our hostages, and ensuring that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel. That this is interpreted as a challenge to President Biden speaks volumes about the shift in U.S. policy toward Israel, which certainly does not support the objectives of the Israeli war. The joke around Jerusalem is that while Mr. Biden once worked to help Israel, he's now working on the two-state solution, Michigan and Nevada. Israelis notice that the president rarely speaks of defeating Hamas anymore. Instead, he bashes Israel under the cover of bashing Israeli war-time leadership, including Netanyahu, the prime minister. The joke around Jerusalem is that while Mr. Biden once worked to help Israel, he's now working on the two-state solution, Michigan and Nevada. Israelis notice that the president rarely speaks of defeating Hamas anymore. Instead, he bashes Israel under the cover of bashing Israeli war-time leadership, including Netanyahu, the prime minister. This dance is Mr. Biden's way of catering to the non-supporters of war, hence perceived as anti-Israel left, without alienating the proclaimed bulk of U.S. voters who think the was as the only solution, would find it unconscionable to turn on the Israeli people in wartime by helping them get out of the war. What Henry Kissinger once said about Israel having no foreign policy, only domestic politics, Israelis are now saying about America. How else to explain Mr. Biden's red line on Rafah, Hamas's final stronghold? Mr. Netanyahu says, you cannot say you support Israel's goal of destroying Hamas and then oppose Israel when it takes the actions necessary to achieve that goal. To leave Hamas in power in Rafah is to lose the war, and to replace Hamas with Fatah is to lose the peace. That's an Israeli consensus and clear understanding. Schumer has sent a very dangerous message to Hamas. Michael Oren. Israeli officials say the U.S. military understands that Rafah must fall, but Biden officials don't. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Monday that our position is that Hamas should not be allowed a safe haven in Rafah or anywhere else but a major ground operation. There would be a mistake, yet none of their political solutions for Gaza can succeed if Hamas battalions remain intact. There will be no politics if Hamas cannot dialogue with its Palestinian rivals to condemn Israel. Mr. Biden referred to the Hamas figure of more than 30,000 casualties in Gaza. Why doesn't he mention that Israel says more than 13,000 of them were Hamas fighters? The resulting combatant to civilian casualty ratio attests to Israeli accuracy and restraint, but that isn't what they want to hear. In Dearborn, Michigan, last Monday's release of a U.S. intelligence assessment casting doubt on the political viability of Mr. Netanyahu's wartime leadership and predicting large protests against him was highly unusual in the time of diplomacy. That's how the U.S. once treated enemy dictatorships, not allied democracies. Mr. Biden has also endorsed Senator Chuck Schumer's extraordinary declaration last week that Israelis must oppose the elected Mr. Netanyahu, a contrasting shift in White House position. Other Democrats are piling on. Even more serious are delays in U.S. weapons transfers, leaked threats to cut off arms, and Sado Vos Biden administration efforts to discourage other countries from exporting weapons to Jerusalem. Ammunition supplies are a major concern, but Israel's existential nerve has been touched, and it doesn't need a timid Biden administration to give it the green light on Rafah. Israel is now producing more of its own munitions, and the mood is that it will continue the fight, despite the restraints to the continuation of weapons supply, which is crucial at this stage. Mr. Netanyahu doesn't treat the U.S. as an unapproachable black box, which spits out a presidential policy and that's final. He knows US public opinion can be influenced to constrain the president's power. If Mr. Biden thinks he's the only one with leverage here in advance of a US election, he's not. Behind this spat is the dawning of knowledge in Israel that perhaps the US can't be relied on. It is noted, even if the radical wing does not take over, it is already a permanent force that no Democratic Party leader can ignore. There is more hope in Israel for a Trump administration, who is likely to take over the presidential election, but also wariness. For now, the Republicans who would abandon Ukraine still speak up for Israel. Will that always be true? At present, the US doesn't appear willing to help Ukraine stave off defeat or Israel clinch victory. The world is watching, and the key for the Middle East isn't to see that Israel can compromise with the Palestinians, but that it can carry US support all the way to victory against Iran-backed Hamas or not, which at the moment is an open question.